Before the first card hit the table in the smoke-choked silver ace, Sam Hartwell knew the game was crooked. Deadwood was full of men who'd sell their souls for a shot of whiskey, but tonight the wager wasn't coin or cattle, it was a girl. 13 rail thin and staring at him with eyes too old for her years. Emma Patterson wasn't afraid. She'd already met fear and lived to tell it. What she hadn't met yet was someone willing to stand between her and the devil. Sam hadn't planned to be that man. He was broke, bone-tired, and one bad winter away from losing Silver Creek. But some bets aren't about luck. They're about deciding what kind of man you're going to be when the last hand's dealt. In the space between shuffling cards and fate's turn, Sam pushed everything he had into the pot, and in doing so, changed both their lives forever. The rain had passed, but the town still wore its mud like a second skin. Each step Sam Hartwell took sank half an inch into the muck, the weight of failure dragging behind him like a broken saddle. He walked with purpose down Main Street, though purpose was all he had left. The wood-planked boardwalk creaked beneath his boots, lanterns flickering low behind foggy windows, and 100 shadows lingered in the corners where light didn't dare go. It was near midnight, but Deadwood didn't sleep. Not truly. Not the kind of sleep honest folks knew. The saloons bled out, music played half-drunk and half-hearted. Brothel windows glimmered with pale flame and promises as cheap as the perfume. And in the air, something foul and familiar desperation. Sam tugged his hat lower and pushed open the door to the Silver Ace Saloon. The stench of whiskey cigar smoke and sweat greeted him like an old enemy. Inside the room buzzed with tension and coin. Cowboys fresh off the trail leaned heavy against the bar miners, tossed their earnings like they were trying to bury bad luck. And gamblers sat smooth and still, watching every hand like it might be their last. Sam didn't belong here. Not anymore. He wasn't a gambler, not since the war broke the bones of his soul and the cattle market broke the rest. But he was a man out of options, and desperation had a way of dragging a man back to places he'd sworn off. He spotted him near the far table. Jake Morrison. Same slick grin, same snake oil charm. Dressed in an embroidered vest that looked like it came from a theater stagecoach, not a mining town half drowned in mud. Years ago, Sam and Jake had sat at that very table and nearly killed each other over a stacked deck. Tonight, they met again under different stakes. "Well, look what the wind blew in," Jake drawled, lifting his glass with mock cheer. "Heard your ranch is drying out faster than your luck." Sam didn't rise to the bait. "Figured you'd be dead or behind bars by now." Jake's grin widened. Deadwood's got long shadows and short memories. The offer came quicker than Sam expected. $500 buy-in, more than he had. But Jake sweetened the pot or poisoned it depending on how you looked at it. "There's a side wager," he said, snapping his fingers. From the shadows, a figure was dragged forward. A girl maybe 13. Thin. Dirty. Her hair tangled and face smudged, but her eyes were sharp, defiant, unafraid. That look stopped Sam cold. It wasn't fear. It was knowledge. Like she'd already been through hell and was sizing him up as the next devil on the trail. "She's called Emma," Jake said. "Street rat from the alleys behind Maddox & Co. Owes me more than she could ever repay, so she's the wager. You win, she's yours. You lose, well, guess she goes back to the gutter." Sam's stomach twisted. Gambling for a child. It was vile. But as his mind flashed back to the cracked water troughs, the starving cattle, and the look in his wife Annie's eyes when the bankman came knocking, he realized something bitter. He wasn't playing to win. He was playing not to lose everything. "What's your name?" he asked the girl quietly. "Emma Patterson," she said. Her voice was gravel rough, dry but steady. Sam nodded once. "Deal the cards." And just like that, the game began. 5-card draw, no wilds, no mercy. The silver ace fell silent as the cards hit the table, and somewhere in that smoky room, Sam Hartwell realized this wasn't about the ranch anymore. This was about redemption, about saving one soul even if he couldn't save his own. The wagon rolled slow across the uneven dirt wheels, creaking beneath the weight of dry supplies, dwindling hope, and a girl who hadn't spoken a word since they left Deadwood. Sam Hartwell sat beside her, hands loose on the reins, but mind tight with thoughts that wouldn't settle. The land spread out ahead in gray-blue waves, the hills still dappled in spring snowmelt, the fields below still bare from the long, cruel winter. Beside him, Emma Patterson sat stiff-backed, arms crossed beneath his oversized canvas duster. It hung from her like a sheet from a clothesline, barely clinging to her thin shoulders. She said nothing, but her sharp, sunken eyes took in everything: the split-rail fences, the battered windmill, the skeletal silhouettes of cattle who hadn't eaten proper in weeks. She was half-starved herself, but she didn't look weak. No. She looked like a coyote left too long in a trap and waiting for someone to reach too close. They didn't speak for the first hour, just rode. Finally, Sam cleared his throat. "You always this quiet?" Emma didn't look at him. "Depends. On what? On whether a man's worth the words." Sam chuckled dryly. "Fair enough." Silence again. But this one wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence born between people who know better than to trust quick or speak too soon. Sam knew that kind well. The ranch came into view as they crested the last rise. Silver Creek, such as it was, stretched across the valley floor like an old, tired body, weathered barn leaning to one side, fence lines half fallen, and the main house hunched like it was trying to hold in its own breath. The once white siding had faded to pale gray, the paint chipped by years of dust storms and disappointment. Emma's eyes narrowed. "This it?" Sam nodded. "It ain't pretty, but it's home." From the porch, a figure stepped into the afternoon light. Annie Hartwell, arms crossed, hair pulled tight beneath a sun-bleached scarf. Her eyes, sharp as fencing wire, locked onto the girl beside Sam before either of them had climbed down. "What in the Lord's name is this?" she called out. Sam swung down from the wagon joints, creaking like dry timber. "This is Emma. She's—" He hesitated suddenly, unsure how to phrase what had happened in that saloon. Emma didn't wait for him to finish. She climbed down herself, mud sucking at her borrowed boots, chin raised like she was already prepared for judgment. "I'm help," she said plainly. Annie arched a brow. "She's a child." Sam shifted uneasily. "She's sharper than she looks, and we need extra hands." Annie didn't answer, just looked at Emma, a long measuring stare. Emma didn't flinch, didn't even blink. "Can you cook?" Annie finally asked. "No," Emma replied, "but I can chop wood, mend fence, and gut a rabbit if need be." A strange silence passed between the two women, one older and wounded, the other young and wild. Then Annie nodded once and opened the door. "Come inside," she said. "You smell like you've slept behind a butcher's shop." Sometimes I have Emma answered without sarcasm, then followed her in. Inside the house was warmer than Emma expected. A cast-iron stove hummed quietly in the kitchen. There was a patched quilt on the rocking chair and a line of clean mugs drying near the sink. It smelled like ash and coffee, not sweet but familiar, like something solid. Annie busied herself with the kettle. Sam lingered in the doorway, not quite sure where he belonged in the scene. "You hungry?" Annie asked the girl, not turning around. Emma hesitated. "Last real meal I had was when the snow fell. That was 4 months ago." Emma shrugged. Annie set a bowl on the table, potato soup thick and steaming with a slice of hard bread on the side. "Sit," she ordered. Emma obeyed. She didn't say thank you, just ate slow, cautious at first, like it might be poisoned, then faster when hunger overran pride. Sam watched from the corner. He didn't know what he'd expected, bringing her here. Gratitude, Tears. Relief. What he got was steel quiet, bitter steel forged somewhere no child should have had to walk through. Later that night, Sam found her in the barn, curled up near the hay bales, instead of the guest cot Annie had laid out inside. "Floor in there's softer," he said. "I'm used to barns," Emma replied, not looking up. Sam sat on a nearby crate. "You don't owe me anything, you know. I ain't here for free." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." There it was again, that edge in her voice, like someone who'd lived too long expecting kindness to come with a price tag. Sam sighed, rubbing his temple. "We don't treat people like stock around here." Emma finally looked at him. "Then why'd you gamble for me?" That landed harder than he expected. He didn't have a clean answer, not one that fit right in the mouth. After a pause, he said, "Because no one else at that table gave a damn what happened to you." Emma blinked. Once, then curled tighter into the hay. "Leave the door open," she muttered. "Cold'll get in. So will quiet." Sam nodded, left it ajar. In the days that followed, Emma worked without needing to be told. She hauled water-mucked stalls and chopped wood like it was a challenge she had to win. Annie watched her carefully, her own grief hidden in stiff shoulders and pursed lips. The girl reminded her of the daughter she never had, or maybe the one she'd hoped to be. Tough, untamed, and too young to carry so much silence. Sam noticed other things, the way Emma lingered near the pasture fence, eyes following the horses with something like longing. The way she touched the barn cat with a gentleness she didn't show to people. He saw it for what it was, not softness, but the start of healing. But she was still a stranger, a shadow with wolf eyes. And the Hartwells were just beginning to learn what kind of wild thing they'd let in, and whether she'd run bite or stay. It started with a broken branch, just a snap of pine lying sideways in the wrong direction near the edge of the east pasture. Sam Hartwell noticed it while inspecting the fence line hammer in one hand, coil of wire slung over his shoulder. At first he told himself it was nothing. Could have been the wind or one of the barn cats chasing birds. But something about the break was too clean, too deliberate. His gut, the same one that had kept him alive during ambushes from Missouri to Cheyenne, stirred uneasily. The next morning he found fresh hoofprints by the creek. Deep impressions, sharp edges. Not the wandering kind of cattle, these were men's horses, heavy and paced like they'd been watching. No ranch hand had reason to ride out that far, and it hadn't rained in days, which meant the prints were recent. Sam didn't say anything to Annie just yet. She'd been sleeping better lately. The lines in her face had softened, if only slightly. And Emma, well. Emma was starting to smile in tiny, stubborn ways. A smirk when Sam nearly fell off the wagon, a blink of amusement when the barn cat scratched his boot. He didn't want to break that rhythm. Not if it was just his mind playing tricks. But Emma saw it too. He found her one afternoon standing stone still by the garden. She held a basket in one hand, half full of turnips, but her eyes were locked on the ridgeline to the east. Her shoulders were stiff, her hand twitching near the small pocket knife she kept tied to her belt. Sam set down the hammer he was using on the porch steps. "You see something?" Emma didn't answer right away. The wind moved her hair across her cheek. "I thought I saw light," she said finally. "Flicker. Like glass?" Sam's throat tightened. "A spyglass?" he asked. Emma didn't respond, but her silence said enough. That night they sat at the kitchen table after supper. The stove crackled softly, casting a gentle glow against the chipped enamel walls. Annie dried dishes near the basin, while Emma, arms crossed, leaned back in her chair like someone expecting a blow. "I found tracks near the creek," Sam said plainly. "Fresh. Too fresh." Annie paused, towel in hand. Emma didn't flinch, but her eyes flicked toward the window, the dark beyond it, heavy with silence. "You know who it is, don't you?" Sam asked. Still no answer. Emma Annie said gently, "If you know something, now's the time to speak." For the first time since she'd stepped foot on their land, Emma's composure cracked. Her fingers trembled slightly as they played with the frayed cuff of her shirt. Her jaw worked, then stilled. Finally, in a voice low and rough, she said, "I wasn't just a runner for Morrison." Annie turned. "Jake Morrison." Emma nodded. "I kept his books." Sam blinked. "His what?" "His ledgers." Emma clarified. "Numbers, names, who owed what, where it went, who got paid to look away." Annie dropped the towel. "You were his accountant." Emma's laugh was sharp and bitter. Didn't need to be grown to count dirty money. Sam leaned forward. "You steal something from him." Emma reached into her boot and pulled out a small leather-bound book worn thin at the edges. She set it on the table like it weighed more than a sack of feed. Names, amounts, payoffs. Some of them wore a badge, some wore robes. One or two even wore Pinkerton pins. Annie sat down, her face pale. "I figured if Morrison ever came after me," Emma continued, "this'd be my insurance." Sam opened the ledger. The handwriting was tidy, small, efficient, impersonal. Numbers lined up with initials. Abbreviations for towns, saloons, and dates. It was all there, neat as tax records. But this wasn't taxes. This was poison, blackmail, and maybe a death sentence if the wrong man saw it. "You think he's coming for this?" Sam asked. Emma's expression hardened. "I know he is." Silence gripped the room like a blizzard. The only sound was the hiss of the stove and the distant howl of coyotes beyond the hill. Annie finally whispered, "We could bring it to the sheriff." Sam shook his head. "Sheriff Dobbins is in that book. I'd bet my saddle on it." Annie folded her arms. "So what do we do?" Sam looked from his wife to the girl he'd pulled from a losing hand. The weight of their survival of their peace settled on him like a rifle across his back. "We get ready." The next day, Sam climbed into the hayloft and pulled down the long, narrow case hidden beneath a loose board. Inside lay the Winchester 1873, oiled clean and waiting. It had seen him through border skirmishes, railcar robberies, and one particularly bad winter in Kansas City. Now it would see him through this. Emma helped clean it. Hands, steady, silent, focused. "You ever shoot?" Sam asked. Once she replied. Maybe twice. "Rats." Something like that. Sam didn't press. He showed her how to brace her elbow against a fence post, how to breathe through the shot, how to count the seconds between cracks and echoes. She picked it up quick. Too quick. She's done this before, he thought grimly. Annie stocked the root cellar with beans and dried meat. Sam reinforced the barn doors and trimmed the pasture grass near the fence line so no one could hide in it. Emma stayed close to the house, always scanning the tree line like she was waiting for a ghost to appear. 3 days passed. Then came the first shot. Sam woke before his boots hit the floor. He grabbed the Winchester and moved to the window. Another shot followed closer. From the porch, Emma shouted, "Riders, 6 of 'em!" Annie grabbed the shotgun and bolted upright. Outside, dawn was only just breaking a soft purple bruising of sky. On the ridge, horsemen moved like wraiths through the trees. At their front rode Jake Mallory Morrison's enforcer, crude, cruel, and itching for a fight. Sam stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "They're here," Emma said. Her voice didn't shake. Her stance didn't waver. Sam looked at her, a child still in years, but carrying fire no grown man could match. "Get ready," he said. The wind carried the scent of gunpowder. The devil was coming, and Silver Creek would not go down quiet. The smoke hadn't yet cleared from the porch rail. Burnt timber still clung to the scent of kerosene and gunpowder. The barn bore fresh scars, bullet holes punched clean through the siding like accusations. The fields had gone quiet, save for the lowing of restless cattle and the metallic click of Sam Hartwell oiling his rifle in silence. That night, around the supper table, the family sat tense and wordless. Emma picked at her food, though her eyes rarely left the window. Annie's hands trembled slightly as she ladled soup, masking it with a familiar stubbornness. Sam didn't touch his plate. His mind churned like storm water against the stone. Morrison wasn't done. The raid was a message, not a war. The next wave wouldn't be a bluff. "I have to go back," Sam said, finally breaking the quiet. Annie froze. "Back where Deadwood?" Emma looked up, lips tightening. "You're going to him," Annie said flatly. "Not a question. I'm going to end it," Sam replied. Emma stood her chair, scraping back against the worn floorboards. "You think he'll bargain in good faith?" Sam didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat and pulled out the worn leather ledger Emma had given him weeks ago. The thing looked small in his calloused hand, but its weight filled the room like thunder. "He wants this," Sam said. "Badly enough to send gunmen. Badly enough to risk a war. I say we use it." Annie's voice cracked. "And what do we use you for? You think Morrison won't bury you the minute you show your face?" "Maybe," Sam said. "But it ends with me, not with her." Emma crossed her arms. "You shouldn't have to go alone." He looked at her then. Really looked. The bruises on her had long faded, but the fire in her hadn't. She'd grown into her place at the ranch like a pine twisted by wind, bent maybe, but never broken. "I have to do this," he said. Emma nodded once, jaw clenched. "Then you better take it all," she said, and handed him a folded piece of paper, a duplicate page from the ledger written in her own hand. "In case he plays dirty." Sam left just after midnight, riding beneath a cloud-choked moon. The plains were still the air, sharp with the scent of sage and smoke. Behind him, Silver Creek disappeared into darkness. His home, his wife, the girl who had changed everything. He felt the weight of it all in the saddle. But he carried something heavier, still the knowledge that peace doesn't come free, and sometimes it costs a man the last piece of his soul. By morning, Deadwood loomed ahead. Crooked buildings leaning over muddy streets, saloons lit by flickering gas lamps, even in daylight the whole town smelling like spilled whiskey and old blood. He tied his horse outside the Silver Ace saloon, same hitch rail where he'd first met Morrison years ago. Nothing had changed except Sam. Inside the saloon was thick with noise. Poker chips clacked boots, shuffled a piano, groaned off key in the corner. But at the back, where the shadows curled like smoke, sat Jake Morrison, lounging with a cigar in one hand and a pistol on the table beside him. "Well, well," Morrison drawled, voice like oil over gravel. "If it ain't the rancher with a death wish." Sam didn't blink. He walked to the table and set the ledger down between them. Morrison's eyes narrowed. The grin didn't reach them. "You got brass, I'll give you that." "This ledger's got names," Sam said. "Some you pay, some you blackmail, some you kill, but every one of them has something to lose." Morrison glanced at the book, then at Sam. "You threatening me?" "No," Sam said plainly. "I'm offering a deal." He leaned in, quiet but firm. "You tell your boys the girl's dead, gone, buried on some nameless hill. You leave Silver Creek alone forever, and this book disappears." Morrison snorted. "You got copies." Maybe Sam lied. But maybe I'm tired of the blood. Maybe you are too. A long silence stretched between them. Morrison tapped ash into a tray. He looked down at the ledger, flipping through the pages slowly, his face unreadable. "This book goes up in smoke the minute I walk out," Sam added. "No backup, no noise, just done." Another beat. "You always were too soft for this world," Morrison said at last. "You think a child's worth all this risk? I think some things are worth fighting for," Sam replied. "And some devils ain't worth running from anymore." Morrison studied him, then snapped the book shut and slid it off the table. "Fine," he muttered. "You got your deal." Sam stood, but before he could turn, Morrison's voice slithered after him. "You cross me again, Hartwell, and I'll burn that ranch with your bones still warm on the porch." Sam looked back once. "You so much as breathe our name again, Morrison, and I'll finish what that ledger started." The ride home felt longer, though the sky was brighter now. Rain had fallen somewhere upriver, and the scent of damp earth hung sweet on the wind. Sam returned to Silver Creek at dusk, the lanterns already lit along the porch rail. Annie stood at the door, arms crossed, relief, masked by defiance. Emma sat on the top step, sharpening a small blade with a whetstone, her expression unreadable. Sam dismounted, walking slow, the saddle creaking under its own weight. "It's done," he said. Annie didn't speak, just pulled him into a rough hug that lingered longer than either of them expected. Emma stood, but didn't come closer. "And you believe him?" she asked. Sam looked at her, tired but resolute. "No, but I believe we've bought ourselves time." She nodded once, then slid the extra copy of the page into the fire. "You gave him what he wanted," she said softly. "Now we make sure he never comes for what he's lost." Sam looked out across the land, battered, bruised, but still standing. So were they. The storm passed, but its memory lingered in the cracked porch rail and scorched fence line. Morrison's men hadn't returned, not in days, not in weeks. And yet Silver Creek Ranch breathed cautiously, as if the wind might still change its mind. The scars were still visible, a singed patch of siding here, a half-buried bullet there, but so were the signs of life. The cattle were healthy again. The garden had survived. And Emma Patterson, well, she was changing too, not overnight. Change like hers never happened all at once. It came in increments in the way she stood taller when strangers rode past the gate, in the ease with which she handed tools to Sam, no longer needing to be asked, in the softening of her voice when she spoke to Annie about things like flour or soap or what kind of beans grew best along the southern edge of the fence. But something deeper had shifted too, and Sam could feel it even before she said the words. They were in the barn one evening, brushing down the horses after a long day. The golden light from the loft window cast them in the same warm hue as the straw under their boots. Sam worked in silence, running the curry comb over Dusty's flank while Emma tightened a bridle nearby. "Mr. Hartwell," she said suddenly. He looked up. "Yeah." She didn't stop working. "Why did you really bring me here?" The question was gentle, but it landed like a hammer. Sam rested the brush on a rail and turned to her, trying to find words that didn't sound like excuses. "I told you," he began. "I didn't plan to. I wasn't looking for a kid or anything, really. Just a hand of cards and maybe a miracle." She looked up at him, steady, unreadable. "And did you get one?" Sam considered her. The once scrawny girl with wolf eyes and a chip on her shoulder had become a young woman with calloused palms and a spine like iron. She still didn't smile much, but when she did, it reached all the way to her eyes. And those eyes, once cold with suspicion, now held something else. Something like belonging. "I think I did," he said quietly. Emma nodded. "Set the bridle down. I want to stay." Sam furrowed his brow. You know you don't have to. You're of age now. Free to go if you want. I don't want to just stay, she clarified. I want to belong here. I want to learn the books, the land deeds, how to balance feed costs against market trends. I want to know how to keep this place standing when you and Annie aren't here anymore. Sam blinked, stunned. That's a hell of a request. It's not a request, she said, stepping forward. It's a promise. I don't have blood kin left. But if I'm going to choose a name, I want it to mean something. I want it to earn something. Silence stretched between them, not heavy, but reverent. All right, Sam said finally, voice rough with something too old to name. Then it settled. The next morning, under a blue prairie sky, Sam and Annie signed the adoption papers. They didn't do it with ceremony or tears, just quiet ink on paper and a breakfast of cornbread and coffee afterward. Emma Patterson became Emma Hartwell by name, but in truth, she'd been a Hartwell from the moment she refused to run. The years that followed moved like a river after thaw-swift muddy full of bends and moments that tried to break the banks. But the Hartwells held, and Emma proved herself with every passing season. She rose before sunrise, sometimes before Sam. She oversaw harvest schedules, kept the books straight, and trained the new ranch hands, most of them young and wary like she'd once been. Word spread about Silver Creek, not just as a working ranch, but as a haven. The first boy arrived in autumn, a wiry 10-year-old named Luke, with dirt under his nails and bruises on his back. Emma found him sleeping in the hayloft and didn't raise the alarm. She left him a bowl of stew and a blanket instead. He came to the kitchen the next day and never left. Then came Ruthie, a girl with fire in her voice and fear in her bones. Then Jonah, who hadn't spoken a word in weeks, but followed Emma like a shadow. By 1890, Silver Creek housed 8 children. By 1892, a dozen. And Emma knew all their names. She taught them how to work, how to read, how to stitch a torn saddle and treat a horse with respect. She taught them boundaries and choices, things she hadn't had but insisted they deserved. She ran Silver Creek with grace and grit, and though Sam remained the legal owner, everyone knew who held the ranch's heart. One spring evening, as the wind rolled lazy through the cottonwoods, Sam found Emma leaning against the porch post, watching the newest batch of kids chase chickens through the yard. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. Emma smirked. "Used to, and now." She glanced at the barn, the fields, the hills that had once felt like a cage, and now felt like a promise. "This place saved me," she said. "I think I owe it the same." Sam nodded. "You've given it more than we ever hoped." She looked at him, voice low. "It's not just a ranch, is it?" "No," he said. "It's what happens when someone bets wrong and it turns out right." They stood in silence a while longer as the stars began to show and the screen door creaked open behind them. Emma didn't say much after that. She didn't need to, because the truth was written across the land in every mended fence, in every meal served warm, in every child who stopped flinching when someone raised their voice. The gamble had become a legacy, and she was the one holding the reins. By the spring of 1900, Silver Creek Ranch no longer resembled the withered patch of dirt Sam Hartwell once feared he'd bury himself in. The fences stood straight and strong. The barn, once bowed by time and weather, now gleamed with fresh timber and careful paint. Fields stretched wide and green under the Dakota sun, dotted with fat cattle and long-legged colts kicking up dust in the morning light. But the greatest change wasn't in the land. It was in the people. What had begun as a desperate gamble in a smoky saloon had become something far greater, something sacred. Emma Hartwell, once a grim-eyed girl passed across a poker table like property, now walked the ranch with the sure stride of someone who had earned every inch of ground beneath her boots. She was no longer just helping tend to Sam's legacy. She was shaping her own. The ranch had become a sanctuary not only for cattle and crop, but for the castaways of the West children from brothels, mining camps, alleyways, and broken homes. Word had spread quiet and steady, the way wind moves through wheat. Folks spoke of Silver Creek as a place where orphans became ranch hands, where scars didn't disqualify you, and where hard work, hot meals, and steady love could build a new life. Some came with nothing but a name. Others didn't even have that. Emma took them in, all the same fed them, trained them, taught them to ride, read, stitch count, and believe. She became the steady heart of it all. Sam and Annie, now grayer and slower, watched it unfold like a prayer, being answered one sunrise at a time. They didn't speak often of the ledger, or Jake Morrison, or the night the barn caught fire. But the shadows of that past still hung at the edge of memory, reminders of what it took to buy peace and the price of protecting it. One warm evening, Sam stood at the fence line, cup of coffee in hand, watching the children race barefoot through the tall grass. He wasn't a sentimental man, hadn't been in years, but the sight caught him right in the throat. Beside him, Emma leaned on the fence rail, arms folded, face calm. Her eyes followed every step, every laugh, every bit of joy she'd helped plant in once wounded hearts. "You ever think back on it?" Sam asked. "That night in Deadwood." Emma's mouth twitched. "Sometimes. Feels like another life. Reckon it was." She turned to him, then older now, but with the same fire in her gaze. "You regret it?" "That bet you made," Sam didn't answer right away. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of hay and sage. He looked out across the land, the barn, the bunkhouse, the porch where Annie was folding laundry while a little girl tugged at her skirt. "No," he said at last. "I think it was the first thing I ever got right." Emma's gaze softened, but her voice stayed steady. "He's still out there, you know. Morrison." She nodded. "Or men like him. The ones who think the world's something they can own. Trade. Break." Sam nodded slowly. "Then it's a good thing you're the one running this place now." Emma smiled, not wide, but real, and as twilight settled over the Dakota hills, the ranch came alive with supper bells, horses returning to pasture, and the laughter of children who'd learned to laugh again. It wasn't just a ranch anymore. It was a testament, a breathing, growing promise that the past didn't have the final word, not here. Not under this roof, because family wasn't always blood. Legacy wasn't always land. And home, true home, was something you chose every damn day. And Emma Hartwell chose it. If this story stirred something in your soul, if you believe the West was more than guns and gold, but about grit, redemption, and found family, then subscribe to Whispers of the West. We bring you tales that he'll haunt and hold fast to your heart. Don't just watch history, feel it.